problems you're trying to solve and what benefits of the particular cloud you're looking at are. And if I'm building the next possible Facebook, then Google's platform may be very interesting. If I'm doing scientific data crunching or financial data crunching for an organization, it's probably not the right solution. So another question?
How do Amazon services work with, say, data compression, or do they compress as you place it out onto the cloud?
They do not.
They do not.
They do not. They basically take the approach, and Microsoft does the same. They say it's your data. We're not going to muck with it, right? You do what you want to. So if you want to do data compression, if you want to do encryption, you're welcome to. And part of the project I've been working on, we've actually seen some really interesting things. And talk again, not to pick the other talk, we'll talk about a little bit next one, where we've done some sort of cloud-side data proxies. So I was focusing on passing data, as much data as I could in certain periods of time. And we found it was actually interesting, particularly in the Amazon case, to use an EC2 instance as a data proxy. So rather than talking directly to S3, I created a WCF service that lived in Amazon that would accept my data. I pass it, so transport over the wire, I would compress and encrypt and do some interesting chunking things. Once it got inside the Amazon cloud, where their network speed is much faster and bandwidth is free, I would decompress it and pass it on to the storage thing. And because I was compressing it, because I wanted it to live decompressed, because I wanted it URL accessible. But I could sort of optimize my traffic across the public internet and see some pretty significant performance increases. But they're not going to just step on it. And it's actually a problem right now with, or something people are pushing on Microsoft for with their blob storage is if you're serving content from them, by default, they don't gzip your content. Which if you're doing if you're serving a lot of static content from their site, you wish that they would. And that's an ongoing feature request. Yes?
If you scale a large app comparable to a web farm, what would be the differences? Would there be any limitations in the cloud environment versus just a normal web farm that you would control all the servers?
So yes, and the answer to that is probably multiple hour conversation. The short version is the question about where is it that you add value, right? And that's and what staff and assets do you have available? It's sort of is broad anytime you're looking at the cloud or any service you're looking at. If you want to focus on your app design or on your business, and you don't really care about servers and IP addresses and how to horizontally scale, some of the cloud platforms are very, very interesting. If you already have an existing server farm, you've got a crackerjack network team and so forth, you may want to stay with them. Where the cloud really shines, though, even in that case, is burst scaling. So if I have a website that has a very consistent usage, I always need 10 web heads. They're always sort of pretty level traffic. It's not going to be cost interesting for me to do that in the cloud over the long term, generally. If I've got a site that maybe sort of throttles around 3 web servers, but at times of the year I need 7 or 8, but then I don't, that's sort of the model where the cloud really shines, right? I can scale up. I don't have to worry about procurement problems in the model. I just click a button and say, give me another one. And when I'm done, I say, take it away. And my charges follow that. It's really interesting in that model. But if you've got sort of a static load, it's not necessarily something you just want to enjoy.
And capabilities like search, spreading across a cloud.
In the Amazon model, it's going to be nearly identical, okay, to what you would do internally. And that's the sort of the platform as a service models. You know, as with anything, as you move up a stack, you're trading off control for magic, right? So as you move up the stack from IIS to PAS, there's a certain amount of control and fine grit flexibility that you're giving up, but you're getting some magic. You're like, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore, right? So you move it, for example, in Azure, I deploy my code package and say, I want 12 of these. I don't have to think about IP addresses or admin passwords or patching. I just simply say 12, and they make sure I always have 12. Now that also means there are certain things I can't do at the node level. So if I really need that finer level of memory control, I'm going to struggle with the Azure platform. I can't RDP into my box for today and tweak something. I have to follow their model. So it's and Google's even more so, right? You fit in their bucket. They horizontally scale you automatically. You don't even think about it. They simply say, hey, your app's not responding fast enough. We're going to give you another node and deploy your code. And they'll do the converse as well. Hey, you don't need 12 nodes anymore. We're not failing. So they've got all this magic built in, but you're throwing away some control. So it's pick where you're comfortable and what fits your business.
I have a question.
Yes.
If that's how this works, if I have a web farm, how can I roll out changes to DLLs, for example, without disrupting my clients? Because it sounds like what you're saying is I couldn't just pull out one server from my web farm and update that and then put it back in there and then do that for each of them. I'd have to take the whole thing down, wouldn't I?
Well, so in the case of, say an Amazon model,
Yeah.
you are, it's really no different than doing internal farm deployment. So in an internal farm, you probably have, say you've got 4 webheads, and you've got code local to the box, but you're not pulling from the standard, you've got code local. You probably have a load balancer in the front, and if you want to do a spot upgrade, you're going to go into the load balancer, you're going to take something out of the balancer, you're going to deploy your code, test it, then add it back, you're going to do juggle bit, right? With Amazon, you can do the exact same thing. They've got their cloud front, they've got their load balancer. You can go in from a web page, you can say, here's the 4 machines behind my load balancer, I'm going to take this one out, and then I want to interact with it. So if that's the level of control you want and need, you certainly have that availability.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now, in
But
the
there's
Microsoft
a whole
model,
elastic concept of it, just
Well, that's what-
adding in stuff for you.
again, that's an optional setting.
Okay.
So it doesn't, nothing, with the Amazon model, very little happens by magic. It's configuration, you can choose that. But if you want to do that elastic thing, and probably if you're actually deploying updates, you're probably going to turn that off while you're doing it.
Oh, okay.
You're going to sort of pick what you're going to do. Right? You wouldn't, if you were deploying updates, you're not going to be adding to that head at the same time. Private environment, you probably wouldn't do the same thing. Yes.
So you mentioned IP addresses when in that example you had where you had your own
Yes.
web service. You address that through the IP address, or did you have to go out and do a DNS registration?
So they have this notion, by default, you get basically a DHCP assigned address every time you spin a new instance. Okay? They also have, and you get both a private and a public address. Okay? And depending on how you're using your app, that may be fine. Now, they have this notion of what's called an elastic IP address, which is another product that they charge you a few cents per hour for. And that's basically a static IP that you control. So if you're actually doing a web platform like this, you would probably have one of those elastic IP addresses that's assigned to the front end of your load balancer, right? And then because you probably frankly don't care about your back addresses so long as your load balancer, the load balancer that you're using knows about.
Well, the thing that I've never really understood about this addressing is if I have a web service called Foo, how do I put Foo on? I go out to IIS and I install Foo on the machine, right? And how do I address Foo? Do I just get cat name Foo to the address that they gave me for the machine?
Yes, or you can do a DNS setup. I mean, you've got all the control in the cloud that you with respect to that as you go to the cloud.
Yeah, but if I didn't want DNS, I just wanted that.
Then you would use, well, they're going to give you a DNS address. You saw that maps the address. I
Yeah,
have the URL.
okay.
Basically, it's a text version of the IP address, text and URL. You can go to that, or you can just use that IP address. Either way.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.